There's a silent trap that ambitious people fall into, and it doesn't look like failure. It looks like progress. You read books, watch videos, take notes, attend seminars, and you feel like you're moving forward. But deep down, nothing in your life is actually changing. That's because knowledge alone does not transform you. Execution does. Even Tony Robbins has always emphasized that it's not what you know, it's what you consistently do that shapes your destiny. Information is potential power, but only action turns it into real power. You don't need more information, you need more implementation. Right now, there are people with less knowledge than you who are winning simply because they act. They don't wait for perfect clarity, perfect timing, or perfect confidence. They move, and through movement, they gain clarity. That's the shift. Stop preparing endlessly and start engaging immediately. Because mastery isn't built in theory, it's built in repetition, in mistakes and adjustment, and in persistence. Understand this: learning feels safe, but doing feels uncomfortable. That discomfort is exactly where growth lies. When you finally step into action, you expose your weaknesses, your fears, your gaps, and most people run back to learning and avoid that feeling. But the ones who rise, they lean into it, they embrace the mess, they accept that being bad at something is the first step toward being great at it. You cannot master what you refuse to practice. You must shorten the gap between what you learn and what you apply. If you read something powerful today, use it today. If you discover a strategy, test it immediately. Action creates momentum. And momentum creates belief. And belief, that's the fuel that keeps you going when things get hard. Waiting kills momentum. Overthinking kills momentum. Perfection kills momentum. But imperfect action, that builds unstoppable force. Another truth most people ignore: consistency beats intensity every time. You don't need to change your whole life overnight. You need to take small, repeated actions daily. Mastery is not an event, it's a process. It's built in the quiet moments when nobody is watching, when you choose discipline over distraction. One action today, another tomorrow, and suddenly you're not the same person anymore. That's how transformation really happens. And finally, decide who you are. Are you someone who collects ideas or someone who executes them? Because your identity shapes your actions. If you see yourself as a doer, you'll act even when you don't feel like it. If you see yourself as a learner, you'll stay stuck in preparation mode forever. Make the shift today. Decide that you are a person of action, not tomorrow, not next week, right now. Because the truth is, simple knowledge can open the door, but only action will walk you through it. People love to say knowledge is power, but if that were true, everyone with access to information would be living extraordinary lives. The reality is much harsher and far more honest. Knowledge without action is just stored potential, like fuel sitting in a tank that's never ignited. You can read every book, watch every lecture, and memorize every strategy, but if your life looks the same, then that knowledge has done nothing for you. Even Tony Robbins has always pushed this truth: it's not what you know, it's what you do with what you know that defines your results. Execution is the force that turns invisible ideas into visible outcomes. There's a dangerous illusion that comes with learning. You feel productive without actually progressing. You finish a video and think you're closer to success. You highlight pages and feel smarter. You plan and organize and prepare, but nothing changes externally. That feeling of "I'm doing something" can trap you for years. Meanwhile, someone with less knowledge but more courage steps forward, takes messy action, fails, adjusts, and eventually wins. The difference isn't intelligence, it's execution. One person collects information, the other converts it into results. When you apply knowledge consistently, something powerful begins to happen. You create evidence. Every action you take becomes proof that you're capable, that you're moving, that you're evolving. Without execution, your brain fills with doubt. Will this work? Am I good enough? But once you act, those questions start to disappear because reality answers them for you. You don't need more certainty. You need more reps. Execution replaces overthinking with experience, and experience builds real confidence that no amount of studying can ever give you. Consistency is where most people break. They might act once, maybe twice, but they don't stay with it long enough to see transformation. Real power comes from applying what you know over and over again, especially when it's boring, especially when it's hard, especially when you don't feel like it. That's the difference between dabbling and mastering. Anyone can take action when they're motivated, but the ones who win are those who continue when motivation disappears. They don't rely on feelings, they rely on discipline. Another truth most people avoid is this: execution exposes you. The moment you start doing, your weaknesses become visible. You realize what you don't know, where you struggle, where you hesitate. And that's uncomfortable. That's why many people retreat back into learning. It feels safer to stay in theory than to face reality. But exposure is not failure, it's feedback. It's the fastest way to refine your skills, sharpen your thinking, and close the gap between where you are and where you want to be. At some point, you have to decide what kind of person you want to be. Are you someone who consumes information endlessly, or someone who turns ideas into action? Because your results will always reflect that choice. Knowledge can guide you, inspire you, even excite you, but only execution will transform you. The moment you start applying what you already know, even in small ways, you shift from potential to progress, from thinking to becoming, from dreaming to actually living it. There's a point where learning stops being productive and starts becoming a sophisticated form of procrastination. You convince yourself that one more video, one more book, one more course will finally make you ready. But readiness is a myth. The truth is, you're not lacking information, you're avoiding action. Endless preparation feels safe because there's no risk of failure, no exposure, no judgment. But that safety is exactly what's holding you back. As Tony Robbins often emphasizes, real progress doesn't come from knowing more. It comes from doing more with what you already know. Overlearning creates the illusion of control. You feel like you're building certainty, stacking knowledge until everything becomes clear. But clarity doesn't come from thinking, it comes from doing. You can study a map all day, but until you take a step on the road, you have no real sense of direction. Action gives you feedback, and feedback sharpens your path. Without it, you're just guessing in your head, trapped in a loop of what ifs and not yet. The longer you stay in that loop, the further you drift from real progress. There's also a hidden cost to overlearning. It kills urgency. When you believe you still need to prepare, you give yourself permission to delay. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow, next week, or when you feel more confident. But that moment rarely comes. Meanwhile, time keeps moving, opportunities pass, and your potential stays locked away. Action, on the other hand, creates momentum instantly. The moment you start, even imperfectly, you break that cycle of delay and step into real movement. Implementation is where transformation begins, and it's never as clean as you expect. It's messy, uncertain, and often uncomfortable. You'll make mistakes, you'll feel unprepared, and you'll question yourself. But that's not a sign you're doing it wrong. That's proof you're finally doing something real. The people who succeed aren't the ones who waited until they had everything figured out. They're the ones who figured it out along the way. They learned by doing, adjusted through experience, and improved through repetition. Another powerful shift happens when you start implementing. You build trust in yourself. Every time you act, you prove that you don't just consume ideas, you execute them. That self-trust becomes your foundation. It replaces hesitation with confidence and excuses with discipline. Instead of asking, am I ready? You start saying, I'll figure it out. That mindset alone separates those who stay stuck from those who move forward relentlessly. At the end of the day, the world doesn't reward how much you know. It rewards what you produce. Ideas don't change your life. Applied ideas do. You already have enough knowledge to take the first step, maybe even the next 10. The only thing missing is action. The moment you stop overlearning and start implementing, you shift from preparation mode to progress mode, and that's where real results begin to show. Perfection is one of the most convincing lies you'll ever believe. It whispers that you need more time, more clarity, more skill before you begin. It tells you to wait until everything aligns, until every detail is flawless. But what it's really doing is keeping you frozen. The right moment you're waiting for doesn't exist. It's something your mind creates to delay risk. As Tony Robbins has often emphasized, success doesn't come from perfect conditions. It comes from decisive action taken in imperfect ones. The longer you wait, the heavier that first step becomes. Imperfect action, on the other hand, has a kind of raw power to it. It's messy, uncertain, sometimes even uncomfortable, but it moves you forward. And movement is everything. The moment you act, you break the illusion of being stuck. You shift from thinking about life to actually living it. Even a small step creates momentum, and momentum has a way of pulling you further than you ever expected. You don't need everything figured out to begin. You just need enough courage to start. The truth is, planning can easily become a hiding place. You tell yourself you're being smart, strategic, responsible, but deep down you're avoiding exposure. Because once you act, your ideas face reality. They can succeed, fail, or fall somewhere in between. That uncertainty is what most people fear. But here's the paradox: the only way to reduce uncertainty is to step into it. Action gives you feedback, and feedback is far more valuable than endless planning. It tells you what works, what doesn't, and what needs to change. Every successful person you admire didn't wait until they were ready. They moved while they were still figuring things out. They made mistakes, learned quickly, and kept going. That's the part people don't see. They only see the polished result, not the imperfect journey behind it. But that journey is where the real growth happens. It's where skills are built, confidence is earned, and resilience is tested. You can't skip that process by planning more. You can only go through it by doing more. There's also something deeply empowering about acting before you feel ready. It rewires your mindset. Instead of depending on motivation or perfect conditions, you start relying on discipline and decision. You realize that action isn't something you wait for, it's something you choose. And once you make that shift, hesitation loses its grip on you. You stop asking, what if I fail? And start asking, what can I learn from this? That's a completely different level of thinking. Time doesn't reward hesitation, it rewards movement. While you're waiting for perfection, someone else is already learning through action, already improving, already getting closer to the result you want. The gap between you and them isn't talent or intelligence, it's speed of execution. So instead of chasing the perfect plan, commit to the next step. However small, however imperfect, just move. Because in the end, it's not the perfect plan that changes your life, it's the action you take right now. Most people believe they need clarity before they begin, that they must fully understand every step, every outcome, every risk before taking action. But that belief quietly keeps them stuck in place. Clarity doesn't come from sitting still and thinking harder, it comes from stepping forward and engaging with reality. As Tony Robbins often emphasizes, you don't need to see the whole path to take the first step. In fact, the path only begins to reveal itself once you start moving. Waiting for certainty is just another way of postponing growth. When you take action, even in small ways, something powerful happens. You gather real feedback, not assumptions, not imagined outcomes, but actual data from experience. That feedback sharpens your understanding far more quickly than endless thinking ever could. You start to see what works, what doesn't, and where you need to adjust. Without action, your mind fills the gaps with doubt and overanalysis. With action, those gaps are replaced by insight and direction. Movement turns confusion into clarity faster than any plan ever will. Confidence works the same way. Most people think confidence is a prerequisite for action, but it's actually a result of it. You don't wake up one day feeling ready. You become ready by doing. Every time you act despite uncertainty, you prove to yourself that you're capable. That proof builds internal trust. It's not about eliminating fear. It's about showing yourself that you can move forward even with fear present. Confidence grows from evidence, and action is the only way to create that evidence. There's also a mental shift that occurs when you stop overthinking and start doing. Instead of being trapped in your head, replaying possibilities and worst-case scenarios, you become engaged in the present moment. Your energy moves from speculation to execution, and in that space, anxiety begins to lose its power. You're no longer asking, what if? You're discovering what is. That shift alone can break the cycle of hesitation that holds so many people back for years. Action also forces you to confront reality, and while that can feel uncomfortable, it's incredibly valuable. It shows you your strengths, your weaknesses, and your blind spots. It reveals where you need to grow and where you're already capable. Without that exposure, you remain stuck in assumptions about yourself, some too limiting, others too inflated. But when you act, you replace assumptions with truth, and truth, even when it's challenging, is what allows real progress to happen. At the end of the day, clarity and confidence are not things you wait for, they're things you build. And they are built through movement, through repetition, through stepping into the unknown again and again. The more you act, the more you understand. The more you understand, the more confident you become. It's a cycle, but it only begins when you decide to move. Discomfort is something most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid, yet it's the very thing that shapes strength, resilience, and mastery. The moment something feels hard, uncertain, or unfamiliar, the instinct is to step back into what feels safe. But safety is where growth dies. As Tony Robbins often emphasizes, your life expands in direct proportion to the discomfort you're willing to tolerate. If everything you're doing feels easy, predictable, and controlled, chances are you're not growing, you're repeating. When you step into discomfort, you're stepping into the unknown, and that's where transformation begins. It's in those moments where you don't feel ready, where your confidence shakes, where your mind questions you, that you're actually stretching beyond your current limits. Growth is not a comfortable process, it's a disruptive one. It challenges your habits, your beliefs, and your identity. But that disruption is necessary because you cannot become a stronger version of yourself while staying in the same mental and emotional space. Most people misinterpret discomfort as a sign that something is wrong, when in reality it's a signal that something is changing. That nervous feeling before taking action, that resistance when you try something new, that pressure when you push beyond your limits, it's not failure knocking, it's growth knocking. The problem is, people retreat the moment they feel it. They go back to what's easy, what's familiar, what doesn't challenge them. And in doing so, they unknowingly walk away from the very opportunities that could elevate their lives. Mastery is built through repeated exposure to discomfort. The first time you do something difficult, it feels overwhelming. The second time, it feels slightly less intimidating. Over time, what once felt impossible becomes manageable, then eventually natural. That's the process. You don't eliminate discomfort, you adapt to it. You expand your capacity to handle more, to push further, to endure longer. And that expansion is what separates beginners from masters. There's also a deeper shift that happens when you begin to embrace discomfort. You stop fearing it. Instead of seeing it as something to avoid, you start recognizing it as a guide. It points you toward what matters, toward what challenges you, toward what has the potential to change you. You begin to lean into it rather than run from it. And in that shift, you gain a level of control and confidence that most people never experience simply because they never stay in discomfort long enough to grow through it. The truth is, every level of success demands a new level of discomfort. What got you here won't take you there. Each step forward will ask more of you, more discipline, more courage, more resilience. And if you're willing to meet that demand, if you're willing to stay in the tension instead of escaping it, you'll find that growth is not something mysterious or distant. It's something happening in real time every time you choose to move forward despite the discomfort. Most people underestimate the quiet power of repetition because it doesn't look exciting, it's not dramatic, it's not instant, and it doesn't give you quick validation. But it is the single most reliable path to mastery. You can understand something in theory, you can explain it, even teach it. But until you've done it over and over again, it's not truly yours. As Tony Robbins has often reinforced, mastery isn't about knowing more, it's about doing more consistently until the skill becomes part of who you are. The first time you try something new, it feels awkward, uncertain, even frustrating. Your mind struggles to keep up, your body resists the unfamiliar rhythm, and everything feels forced. That's the natural beginning of any skill. But with repetition, something incredible starts to happen. What once required intense focus begins to flow. Movements become smoother, decisions become faster, and confidence begins to build. Not because you suddenly figured it out, but because you stayed with it long enough for your mind and body to adapt. Understanding alone creates the illusion of competence. You might feel like you get it after watching or reading, but that feeling can be deceptive. Real competence only reveals itself in execution. When you repeat an action again and again, you uncover the details that theory can never teach you. The subtle adjustments, the timing, the instinct. These are the elements that separate average performance from exceptional performance, and they can only be developed through consistent practice. Repetition also builds resilience. There will be days when you don't feel like showing up, when the progress seems slow, when the results don't match your expectations. That's where most people quit. But those who continue, who repeat the process despite boredom or frustration, are the ones who break through. They understand that mastery isn't about constant excitement. It's about commitment. It's about doing what needs to be done even when it feels repetitive, even when it feels mundane. Another powerful effect of repetition is that it rewires your identity. When you do something consistently, it stops being something you try and starts becoming something you are. You're no longer someone learning a skill. You're someone who lives it. That shift is subtle but transformative. It changes how you see yourself and how you approach challenges. You stop doubting whether you can do it because you've already proven it to yourself through repetition. In the end, repetition is what turns potential into performance. It bridges the gap between knowing and doing, between intention and result. Every time you repeat an action, you're reinforcing a pathway, strengthening a habit, and moving one step closer to mastery. It may not feel extraordinary in the moment, but over time, those repeated actions compound into something powerful, something undeniable, something that sets you apart. One of the biggest reasons people stay stuck is the gap they allow to grow between what they learn and what they actually do. They consume powerful ideas, feel inspired in the moment, and then nothing happens. The energy fades, the notes sit untouched, and life goes on the same as before. That gap is where potential dies. As Tony Robbins often teaches, the speed at which you move from learning to action determines the speed of your results. If you want progress, you can't let ideas sit. You have to activate them immediately. When you apply something right away, you capture the emotional intensity that comes with learning. That spark you feel after hearing a powerful insight isn't random. It's fuel. But fuel only matters if you use it. If you wait too long, that energy disappears and what once felt urgent becomes optional. Acting quickly locks in that motivation and converts it into movement. Even a small step taken immediately can create a ripple effect that keeps you moving forward long after the initial inspiration fades. There's also a psychological advantage to immediate action. It builds trust in yourself. Every time you follow through on what you learn, you prove that you're not just a consumer of ideas, but a creator of results. That consistency strengthens your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who plans to start and start becoming someone who executes without hesitation. And that shift is powerful because once you trust yourself to act, you eliminate one of the biggest barriers to growth, self-doubt. Delaying action, on the other hand, invites overthinking. The longer you wait, the more your mind begins to question, analyze, and complicate something that was once simple. Doubt creeps in, fear grows louder, and suddenly what felt like a clear step becomes overwhelming. Immediate action cuts through that noise. It keeps things simple. It keeps you focused on progress rather than perfection. You don't give your mind time to create excuses, you just move. Momentum is another reason why closing this gap is so critical. Action creates momentum, and momentum creates motivation. It's a cycle that feeds itself. The more you act, the more progress you see. The more progress you see, the more driven you become. But that cycle only begins with that first step taken quickly. If you hesitate, momentum never starts, and everything feels harder than it actually is. Speed isn't about rushing, it's about maintaining flow. The most successful people aren't the ones who learn the most, they're the ones who implement the fastest. They treat ideas like tools, not trophies. The moment they learn something valuable, they test it, refine it, and integrate it into their lives. That's how they grow so quickly. They don't wait for perfect conditions or complete understanding. They act, adjust, and evolve in real time. And that willingness to move immediately is what separates intention from achievement. Most people are addicted to intensity because it feels powerful in the moment. They wait for a surge of motivation, go all in for a few days, and then disappear just as quickly as they started. It feels productive, it feels exciting, but it's not sustainable. Real progress isn't built in bursts, it's built in rhythm. As Tony Robbins often emphasizes, it's not what you do once in a while that shapes your life, it's what you do consistently. Small actions repeated daily may look insignificant, but over time, they create results that intensity alone can never match. There's a quiet strength in showing up every single day, even when you don't feel like it. No hype, no big energy, no dramatic push, just steady, deliberate effort. That's where real discipline is formed. Anyone can perform when they're motivated, but very few can continue when motivation fades. Consistency forces you to rely on commitment rather than emotion. It trains you to act based on decisions, not feelings, and that shift is what turns effort into progress. When you focus on small daily actions, you remove the pressure of perfection. You don't need to change everything overnight. You just need to move forward a little each day. That makes the process less overwhelming and more manageable. One step today, another tomorrow, and suddenly you've built momentum without even realizing it. The beauty of consistency is that it compounds. What seems small in the beginning becomes massive over time simply because you never stopped. Intensity often leads to burnout. You push too hard, expect immediate results, and when those results don't come fast enough, you lose energy and quit. Consistency, on the other hand, protects your momentum. It allows you to pace yourself, to build strength gradually, and to stay in the game long enough to see real change. It's not about how fast you start, it's about how long you can keep going. And consistency is what keeps you moving when intensity fades. Another powerful aspect of consistency is the identity it builds. When you show up daily, your actions begin to define who you are. You're no longer someone who tries to improve. You're someone who lives it. That identity shift changes everything. It influences your choices, your habits, and your mindset. You don't question whether you'll act, you expect it from yourself, and that expectation becomes your standard. In the end, success doesn't come from occasional effort, it comes from repeated commitment. The small things you do every day, the habits you build, the actions you take consistently. Those are what shape your future. Intensity might give you a quick start, but consistency is what carries you to the finish line. Most people think behavior changes first and identity follows, but it actually works the other way around. You don't act your way into a new identity. You identify your way into new actions. The way you see yourself quietly controls everything you do, even when you're not aware of it. As Tony Robbins often explains, lasting change begins when you shift who you believe you are, not just what you try to do. If you see yourself as someone who learns, you'll keep consuming. But if you see yourself as someone who executes, your behavior will naturally follow that identity. Identity acts like an internal script running in the background of your life. Every decision you make, every habit you repeat, every excuse you accept is filtered through that script. If your identity is built around learning, you'll feel satisfied collecting information without applying it. But if your identity is built around execution, not acting will actually feel uncomfortable. You won't need external pressure to move. You'll feel internally driven to act because that's simply who you believe you are. This is why two people with the same knowledge can live completely different lives. One person reads, watches, and understands, but stays stuck. The other person applies, experiments, and adjusts, and grows rapidly. The difference isn't intelligence or resources, it's identity. One sees themselves as a student of information, the other sees themselves as a builder of results. And that small internal definition shapes everything that follows. When you begin to shift your identity toward execution, your standards change automatically. You stop accepting long delays between learning and doing. You stop tolerating inaction. Even small opportunities to apply what you know start to feel important. You don't need motivation to act. You feel a pull toward action because it aligns with how you now see yourself. That internal alignment is powerful because it removes constant internal conflict. The challenge for most people is that their identity has been shaped over years of repetition. If you've spent a long time consuming without executing, your brain has learned to associate learning with safety and action with discomfort. But identity is not permanent. It's flexible. Every time you choose action over hesitation, you reinforce a new version of yourself. Slowly, those choices begin to rewrite your internal identity from learner into doer. Eventually, execution stops being something you force yourself to do and starts becoming something you expect from yourself. That's the real transformation. You no longer debate whether to act. You simply do it because that's who you are. And once your identity shifts in that direction, your behavior doesn't need constant correction. It becomes automatic, consistent, and aligned with the person you've decided to become. Momentum is one of the most underrated forces in personal growth because it doesn't just move your actions forward. It transforms how you see yourself. When you're stuck, everything feels heavy. Every decision feels uncertain. Every step feels risky, and doubt becomes louder than possibility. But the moment you begin to act, even in small ways, something shifts. You're no longer imagining progress, you're experiencing it. As Tony Robbins often emphasizes, action is the foundation of transformation because belief is built through experience, not theory. At the beginning, action might feel forced. You don't fully trust yourself yet, and every step requires effort and intention. But once you start moving, even imperfectly, you begin to collect evidence that you can handle things. That evidence is powerful. It tells your mind, I can do this. And the more evidence you gather, the less space doubt has to survive. Momentum is built in those early repetitions where you act despite uncertainty and still manage to move forward. Confidence doesn't appear before action. It grows from it. Many people wait to feel confident before they start, but confidence doesn't work that way. It's not a starting point, it's a result. Every time you take action and survive the outcome, whether it's successful or imperfect, you build trust in yourself. You realize you can figure things out, adapt, and keep going. That trust slowly replaces hesitation. And over time, what once felt intimidating starts to feel natural. Momentum also changes your perception of difficulty. When you're inactive, even small tasks feel overwhelming because your mind is untrained and your belief is weak. But once you start building momentum, tasks that once felt heavy begin to feel manageable. You're no longer starting from zero each time, you're building from experience. That ongoing movement creates a sense of flow where action becomes easier simply because you've already been in motion. Another powerful shift happens internally. Your identity begins to evolve. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to succeed and start seeing yourself as someone who is actively doing it. That identity shift reinforces your confidence even further. It's no longer about hoping you can succeed. It's about knowing you've already taken steps that prove you can. Momentum turns abstract belief into lived reality, and that reality strengthens your self-trust. Eventually, momentum becomes self-sustaining. The more you act, the more confident you feel. The more confident you feel, the easier it becomes to act again. This cycle compounds over time, creating unstoppable internal force. You stop overthinking because experience replaces doubt. You stop hesitating because action becomes familiar. And at that point, belief is no longer something you search for. It's something you've built through consistent movement. The shift from knowledge to mastery, from thinking to doing, and from hesitation to action all comes down to one simple truth. Nothing changes until you move. Every idea you've learned only becomes valuable when it's applied, and every moment you delay action is a moment you delay your own growth. Real transformation doesn't happen in planning, overthinking, or preparing. It happens in execution, repetition, and consistency. When you start taking action, even imperfectly, you begin building evidence that you can trust yourself. That trust turns into confidence, and confidence turns into momentum. And once momentum is in motion, it starts carrying you forward in ways motivation never could. You stop waiting for the perfect conditions because you realize progress is created, not found. In the end, everything comes back to choice. You can keep collecting information and staying in the comfort of learning, or you can step into discomfort and start building real experience. One path feels safe, but keeps you stuck. The other feels uncertain, but leads to growth, mastery, and real results. The difference is not talent or knowledge, it's action repeated until it becomes who you are.